This video will show you how to replace the front wheel bearing and hub assembly on a Mazda 3. This is part of your front steering and suspension, located behind your front wheel. A quick note about doing this job: once it's complete, you're going to want to get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've completed that, you're going to remove all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts and the wheel. Now that we've removed the wheel, let's have a close look at this area right here along the back side of the brakes. We can see where our outer tie rod end connects to our steering knuckle. Now to dislodge this, you're going to find that you have a locking cotter pin. These come in all different shapes and sizes. Just go ahead and use some pliers or cutters, remove it. Once you have that out of there, just a quick inspection. If it looks like it's reusable, set it aside. Otherwise, dispose of it and replace it. We'll use a 17mm to loosen our mounting nut. Once it's off, just a quick inspection, and then we're going to start it back on a couple threads. We'll use some penetrant in this area. Continuing on, we need to separate the tie rod end from the knuckle. We don't want to cause any damage. I'm just going to carefully use my hammer, cause some vibration. The tie rod should drop down. The nut will prevent it from falling and potentially hurting anybody. Now we should be able to pivot this around. We're focusing on the axle nut next. For this, I'm using a 32mm socket. Once we've removed the nut, we'll use a hammer and punch directly in the center to break the axle free from the wheel bearing hub assembly. Now once you have movement from here, we'll continue on. The next thing I always do is take one of my original lug nuts, and I'm going to start it on just a couple threads here. This is going to prevent the rotor from falling off on us while we continue on. We're going to dislodge the caliper next. Looking along the back side of the caliper, you can see that there's 2 17mm mounting bolts holding the caliper in place to the steering knuckle. We're going to fully remove the first bolt, give it a quick inspection, and just start it back in a couple threads. Now with that started in, we don't have to worry about the caliper falling off while we continue on to the second mounting bolt down along the bottom here. A thorough inspection of all hardware as we continue on will be replacing as necessary. These look fine, we'll set them aside. Go ahead and remove that caliper from your brake rotor. Once you have it off of there, we just want to pay attention to the brake pads. You can see those right in this area. Confirm they don't look like they're damaged or worn low. If they are, you want to replace them. If they look good, just go ahead and set that caliper aside. We're hanging it off to the side, putting no pressure on our flex hose. The caliper is out of the way. We're going to remove that brake rotor next. Go ahead and remove your lug nut. We'll remove the brake rotor. Once you have it off there, you want to make sure you clean it up and give it a close inspection. This looks fine, we'll set it aside. Now we can pay attention to the wheel bearing mounting hardware. Looking along the back side of the wheel bearing hub, this is where we can see the threaded portion of each one of our 4 bolts. There's 2 over here and 2 on the rearward side there. Just go ahead and use some penetrant along these areas. Once you have that sprayed, we're moving along the back side of the knuckle. Along the back side is where you're going to find the 14mm headed mounting bolts to be removed. I've got my 14mm here. Let's make our way to the other side next. Now along here, we can see one of our bolts up along the top and the other one's just below it, just as before. Before we continue any further with removing the wheel bearing, we're starting on the original axle nut, just a couple threads. Obviously, it's still loose. Now that we have the axle nut on there, we're going to start removing that wheel bearing. There are several different ways of doing this. If you don't have a specialty tool, you could use a hammer and start tapping on this, driving it out and away from the knuckle. Otherwise, if you do have a specialty tool, that's something that you would want to use to help prevent any unnecessary damage. As far as this tool itself, I'm going to go right across my hub surface, and the driver is going to go up against this ear on my steering knuckle. Now that I have the tool in place, I'm using my original lug nuts here. I'm going to hold the tool plate directly against the hub. Now let's get this driver in place. We want to be as far in towards the knuckle as possible. You don't want to grab along the outer portion of the ear. You could cause damage. Let's start applying pressure, and what we're paying attention for is this area in between the bearing and that knuckle. We want to have separation here. You can use more penetrant as necessary. A common issue with using a tool like that is it may start pulling out only on the hub and not necessarily on the base of the wheel bearing. Now, if that's the case, I'm going to be using an air hammer and I'm going to start tapping along the base of the bearing, attempting to twist it in one direction or the other, and I'm using some penetrant. Now, since our hub's separated from the bearing assembly, I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. We don't need that. Let's get those bolts out of here. Once you have all the hardware out of there, we should be able to remove the bearing and our backing plate from the knuckle. Commonly, the backing plate will slide off of the bearing. If it doesn't, we're going to carefully work this out of place. Go ahead and remove that backing plate, a quick inspection, and we'll set it aside. Now, this would typically be all one piece, but there it is, friend. Now, prior to installation of any brand new parts, we always like to clean and inspect all mounting areas. So we'll start with the steering knuckle here and our axle shaft. As far as the steering knuckle, we want to pay attention inside of this circular port. The bearing's going to slide in there. Looking in here along the backside, we can see our ABS wheel speed sensor. We want to be extremely careful with that. Now, with that said, continuing on, I'm just going to use a wire brush and some parts cleaner. I have a collection receptacle under this area, of course, so I can collect and recycle all fluids as necessary. We're looking along this outer portion of the knuckle as well. That's the mating surface where the bearing's going to rest against. Just as important. Next, we'll clean and inspect our backing plate. That looks good. After thoroughly cleaning and inspecting the area, apply a thin coat of copper anti-seize to the mounting surface. We don't need very much here, and I'm going to just use a gloved finger to spread it around as necessary. We don't need to get any on that sensor. If you do, you can just go ahead and wipe it off. Just going to go along this outer portion as well, essentially the base. Small amount should do here. And then just a little bit on the axle shaft, just along this area where the splines are, not necessarily on the threaded portion. Now let's prepare to install our brand new wheel bearing. Before we bring it into place, make sure you have your backing plate along the back side of the bearing. We'll get this in place up against our knuckle, aligning the mounting bolt ports and our axle shaft. Once you feel as though you have that in place, we're making our way along the back side for our 4 mounting bolts. As far as these mounting bolts, I cleaned up the areas that had rust and I applied some blue thread locker. We'll start in all the mounting bolts, bottom them out, and then the torque for these will be 75 foot-pounds. That's this side. Let's make sure we snug the other side. Now it's time to torque each of these to 75 foot-pounds, all 4 mounting bolts. There's our first 2. We'll make our way to the rear. Now that we have our wheel bearing hub assembly torqued to our steering knuckle, let's continue on by applying copper anti-seize to the mating surface on our hub. You don't need very much here, just a thin coating will do. Now let's pay attention to our brake rotor, especially along the backside. We want to pay attention to that mating surface. Make sure it's a clean mating surface. Use some sandpaper if necessary. Let's get this in place. Now once you have it on there, we're going to hold it in place. We're going to use our axle nut directly over one of our studs and one of our original lug nuts, holding this in place while we continue on. We don't need to torque this, we just want to make sure the rotor can't move around. Let's continue on with our caliper. Let's get this caliper down. Now as we start bringing this into position, we need to pay attention to our flex hose. You don't want to have a twist in the flex hose, which could cause a restriction in brake fluid flow. We'll take those brake pads inside of the caliper and slide them over the brake rotor. Align the mounting bolt ports and start in both of your mounting bolts. I'm using blue thread locker for each of these. Once you have both of them snug, torque them to 80 foot-pounds. Just one more confirmation on that flex hose. Now we can remove that lug nut and our axle nut there. We're going to attach the tie rod end to the steering knuckle next. We'll just turn this as necessary. We should be able to slide the tie rod stud up and through. Continue on with your mounting nut. Now we'll tighten that mounting nut and torque it to 43 foot-pounds. Now that I have this torqued, I'm going to make an important note. We've replaced the outer tie rod end. The new tie rod end does not have a port for the cotter pin. If you're reusing your original outer tie rod end, you want to make sure you reinstall a brand new cotter pin. Now we're going to install our axle nut right along the center shaft here. For this, to help prevent this from spinning on us while we continue on, you could use a pry bar angling down towards the ground. Or you could just have a second person inside of the vehicle holding on the brake pedal. Whatever's easiest for you. Now as far as the axle nut's concerned, you want to replace it. If you're not replacing your axle nut, you at least want to use blue thread locker. I am replacing my axle nut, so I'm going to start this on here. Now when you go to tighten this, you never want to use an impact tool. We don't want to cause any damage to our wheel bearing. We can snug this up using a hand tool and then we'll torque it. Now that I have that snug, I'm going to torque this to 180 foot-pounds. Now one last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our wheel. Once you have your wheel in place, start on all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts. Bottom them out, we'll get the wheel safely on the ground and torque each of them to 100 foot-pounds. Now we have the wheel safely on the ground, we're going to be torquing these in a crisscross manner to that 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friend, we finished the installation of our front wheel bearing. The next thing you want to do is pump up the brake pedal till it's nice and firm. Take your vehicle for a road test, make sure you have no ABS light and no brake pulsation. Get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.